most welcome to 1376. I am testing the microphones here. It is very loud and noisy. Ambient sound. There is people talking, clattering, and it's also sound from a kitchen nearby. I will today continue with my summary of the master and his emissary. And I am now at page 4. The hierarchy of attention. When there is a high probability that we are looking for lies at the local level, our window of attention narrows. In order to optimize performance at this level, thus reversing the natural tendency to favor the global aspect. Essentially, the left hemisphere's narrow-focused attentional beam, which it believes it turns to whatever it may be, has in reality already been seized by it. It is thus the right hemisphere that has dominance for exploratory attentional movements. While the left hemisphere assists focused grasping of what has already been prioritized. It is the right hemisphere that controls where that attention is to be oriented. In summary, the hierarchy of attention, for a number of reasons, implies a grounding role and an ultimately integrating role for the right hemisphere. With whatever the left hemisphere at the detail level needing to be founded on, and then return to the picture generated by the right This is an instance of the right to left to right progression. Which is a theme of this book. And it lies at the very foundation of experience. Attention, where the world actually comes into being. Novelty, experience, and the right hemisphere. While we are gathering new information, the right hemisphere is responsible, but once whatever it is becomes thoroughly known, familiar, it is taken over by the left hemisphere. So the left hemisphere comes in as soon as something is recognized. Without experiencing whatever it is, we would have nothing on which to ground our knowledge. So we have to experience it at some stage. But in order to know it, we have to process experience. We have to be able to recognize what we experience. To say this is a such and such, that is It has certain qualities that enable me to place it in a category of things that I have experienced before. And about which I have certain beliefs and feelings. Anything newly entering our experiential world instantly triggers a release of noradrenaline, mainly in the right hemisphere. Novel experience induces changes in the right hippocampus, but not the left. So it is no surprise that phenomenologically it is the right hemisphere that is attuned to the apprehension of anything new. Let's take a look at problem solving. Here, the right hemisphere presents an array of possible solutions. Which remain live while alternatives are explored. The left hemisphere, by contrast, takes the single solution that seems best to fit what it already knows and latches onto it. The right hemisphere, with its greater integrative power, is constantly searching for patterns in things. In fact, its understanding is based on complex pattern recognition. It is also why the right hemisphere underpins the appreciation of humor. Since humor depends vitally on being able to understand the context, what is said and done, and how context changes it. Subjects with right brain damage, like subjects with schizophrenia, who in many respects resemble them, cannot understand implied meaning and tend to take conversational remarks literally. Intuition in problem solving. Insight is also a perception of the previous incongruity of one's assumptions. Which links it to the right hemisphere's capacity for detecting an anomaly. Problem solving, making reasonable deductions, and making judgments may become harder if we become conscious of the process. Thus rendering one's thought process explicit or analyzing a judgment may actually impair performance because it encourages the left hemisphere's focus on the explicit, superficial structure of the problem. fluency versus permanence. The critical point here is that the right hemisphere has an advantage where there is fluency in motion. Or flow over time. But the left hemisphere, an advantage where there is stasis or focus on a point in time. There is an ambiguity in the idea of permanence. The left hemisphere seems to accept the permanence of something only if it is static. But things can change, flow, and yet have permanence. Think of a river. And this is a most excellent point. I would say also think of Heraclitus. He wasn't pointing to impermanence. He was pointing to permanence and impermanence. The right hemisphere perceives that there is permanence even where there is flow. Hence, when it is damaged, living beings have no permanency. Hence, when it's damaged, living beings have no permanency. The Capgras phenomenon. The left seeks confirmation. So the left hemisphere needs certainty and needs to be right. The right hemisphere makes it possible to hold several ambiguous possibilities in suspension together without premature closure on one outcome. The right prefrontal cortex is essential for dealing with incomplete information. And has a critical role to play in reasoning about incompletely specified situations. The right hemisphere is able to maintain ambiguous mental representations in the face of a tendency to premature over-interpretation by the left hemisphere. The right hemisphere's tolerance of uncertainty is implied everywhere in its subtle ability to use metaphor, irony, and humor. All of which depend on not prematurely resolving ambiguities. I think we can also make a connection here with a rather fundamental difference between the hemispheres. The left hemisphere's stickiness its tendency to recur to what it is familiar with. Tends to reinforce whatever it is already doing. There is a reflexivity to the process. As if trapped in a hall of mirrors. It only discovers more of what it already knows. And it only does more of what it already is doing. The right hemisphere, by contrast, seeing more of the picture and taking a broader perspective that characteristically includes both its own and the left hemispheres, is more reciprocally inclined and more likely to espouse another point of view. Why differences matter. A couple of related points are worth making. It is said that the hemispheres are more like than they are unlike. It is hard to know exactly what this phrase means, but whatever it means, sometimes in life it is the differences that count. Donald Trump and Albert Einstein are undoubtedly more like than there are unlike. An old banger and a new Ferrari are both cars. With internal combustion engines, and are in that sense much more alike than not. But when I'm buying one, I am interested in their differences. Citizens of two worlds. This fact becomes manifest, however, in the disputes of philosophers and theologians over the ages about the very nature of reality. But such indirect roots become aware of fundamental irreconcilables in the world. Irreconcilables marked that they have led philosophers time and again to conclude that we are citizens of two worlds. Though those worlds were never fully articulated. Making the implicit explicit. The attempt to make the implicit explicit radically alters its nature. As a result, finding the language to put across the way of being of the right hemisphere is simply harder than doing so for the natural explicit left hemisphere. The left hemisphere relies on concatenations of serial propositions. And the literal aspects of language to make meaning explicit. By contrast, metaphor and narrative are often required to convey the implicit meanings available to the right hemisphere. And in a left hemisphere dominated culture, metaphors and narratives are disregarded as myths and fables, or at worst, downright lies. Well, welcome to Sweden is my comment. Myth is arch enemy number one in my country, no doubt. And on my comment. We live in an era where articulating and making explicit are of increasing importance and are treated as a mark of truth, and the inverse treated with increasing suspicion. Is the mind a thing or a process? Is the mind a thing or a process? The brain is not just a tool for grappling with the world. It is what brings the world about. We are not sure and could never be sure if mind or even body is a thing at all. Mind has the characteristics of a process more than of a thing. A becoming, a way of being, more than an entity. A way of being more than an entity. This is very important. A becoming, a way of being more than an entity. Every individual mind is a process of interaction with whatever it is that exists apart from ourselves according to its own private history. How attention changes things. So it is not just with the human world, but with everything with which we come into contact. A mountain that is a landmark to a navigator, a source of wealth to the prospector, a many-textured form to a painter, or to another the dwelling place of the gods, is changed by the attention given to it. Yet nothing objectively has changed. There is no teal mountain which can be distinguished from these. No one way of thinking which reveals the true mountain. Can science be value-free? Science, however, purports to be uncovering such a reality. Its apparently value-free descriptions are assumed to deliver the truth about the object. Onto which our feelings and desires are later painted. Yet this highly objective stance this view from nowhere, to use Thomas Nagel's phrase, is itself value-laden. It is just one particular way of looking at things, a way which privileges detachment a lack of commitment of the viewer to the object viewed. For some purposes, this can be undeniably useful. But its use in such causes does not make it truer or more real, closer to the nature of things. Similarly, we cannot see something without there being a context. Even if the context appears to be that of no context. A thing ripped free of its moorings in the lived world. That is just a special, highly value-laden kind of context in itself. And it certainly alters what we find too. Nor can we say that we do not see things as anything at all. That we just see them full stop. There is always a model by which we are understanding. An exemplar with which we are comparing what we see, and where it is not identified, it usually means that we have tacitly adopted the model of the machine. I'm gonna have to take a smoke break. So we continue a bit here. We are now at page 9. The attempt to adopt a God's eye view, or view from nowhere, In Thomas Nagel's famous phrase, the position pretended by objectivism is as empty as solipsism. And is ultimately indistinguishable from it in its consequences. This is a very sharp comment coming from Iain McGilchrist here, that complete reductionism and perspective from nowhere is the very same ultimately as solipsism or idealism. They amount to the same thing. They are both the workings of the left hemisphere. The view from nowhere pretends to equate to a view from everywhere. What is different is the view from somewhere. Everything that we know can be known only from an individual point of view. Or under one or another aspect of its existence, never in totality or perfection. The model we choose to use to understand something determines what we find. If it is the case that our understanding is an effect of the metaphors we choose, it is also true that it is a cause Our understanding itself guides the choice of metaphor by which we understand it. The chosen metaphor is both cause and effect of the relationship. Thus, how we think about ourselves and our relationship to the world is already revealed in the metaphors we unconsciously choose to talk about it. All understanding, whether of the world or even of ourselves, depends on choosing the right metaphor. The metaphor we choose governs what we see. Even in talking about understanding, we cannot escape metaphors. Grasping things, for example, won't get us as far as we would like, because the most important things in life refuse to be grasped in either sense. Like Tantalus's grapes, they retreat from the reaching hand. The mechanistic model of reality. You can compare it with a machine, if you wish, but the analogy is bound to be a poor one in every respect except of course, whatever it is that the body and the machine have in common. And that is all the comparison will reveal. The catch is that those who have bought into this model as a way to illumination everything about the body will come to look more and more mechanical. And so the model comes to seem more and more apt. The original choice eventually seems confirmed as a perfect fit. Yeah, it's true. We know that modern man uses their body like mechanical tools, like levelers, like things from a tool shed, and thereby destroying their true and natural function that can only come from the use of the intellect, the right hemisphere. Talk of functions and mechanisms leads us up this particular garden path. The model of the machine is only one that the left hemisphere likes. Remember that it is specialized in dealing with tools and machines. The machine is something that has been put together by the left hemisphere from the bits. So it is understandable purely in terms of its parts. The machine is lifeless and its parts are inert. The tappets do not change their nature with their context. The use of language. Words can influence our perceptions. They can interfere with the way in which we perceive colors and facial expressions for that matter. Suggesting that color words can create new boundaries in color perception, and language can impose a structure on the way we interpret faces. In other words, language is necessary neither for categorization nor for reasoning. Nor for concept formation. Nor perception. It does not itself bring the landscape of the world in which we live into being. What it does, rather, is to shape that landscape by fixing the counties into which we divide it, defining which categories or types of entities we see there. How we can carve it up. In other words, language is necessary neither for categorization, nor for reasoning, nor for concept formation, nor perception. It does not itself bring the landscape of the world in which we live into being. What it does, rather, is shape that landscape by fixing the counties into which we divide it, defining which categories or types of entities we see there, how we carve it up. Sorry, I just had to take that doubly. It is very good. The latter description is modern academia in a nutshell. It is all about carving up, adding together, and doing the renaming process, which is so lacking in thinking and understanding. Thinking is prior to language. What language contributes is to firm up certain particular ways of seeing the world and give fixity to them. That has its good side and its bad. It aids consistency of reference over time and space. But it can also exert a restrictive force on what and how we think. It represents a more fixed version of the world in shapes rather than grounds our thinking. We need to struggle towards objectivity, and yet the reality we aim to reveal is itself not precise, so that the artificial precision of our language betrays us. The similarities between mental and physical grasping. There are many links between language and grasp, and they have a similar agenda. Both sharpen focus on the world. Mental grasp, like physical grasp, requires precision and fixity, which language provides. Making the world available for manipulation and possession. Where the left hemisphere's relationship with the world is one of reaching out to grasp and therefore to use. Use it. The right hemisphere appears to be one of reaching out. Just that. Without purpose. In fact, one of the main differences between the ways of being of the two hemispheres is that the left hemisphere always has an end in view. A purpose or use, and is more the instrument of our conscious will than the right hemisphere. The problem with concepts, as things become dulled and inauthentic, they become conceptualized rather than experienced. They are taken out of their living context. A bit like ripping the heart out of a living body. Heidegger calls this process that of Gestell, or framing. A term which suggests the detachment of seeing things as if through a window. As in a famous image of Descartes. Or as represented in a picture, or nowadays framed by the TV or the computer screen. Heidegger is great there. He's the only beacon in the 20th century trying to convince people to go back to intellectual and understanding life. And the descriptions in my comment here are so close to what I experienced myself at the university. This constant chopping, putting together, mechanical system, almost like a clock, and then giving it a new etiquette, a new name, and always taking the pieces you carve from the old. Huge reference lists that shows that nothing ever can be new. Everything is like the left hemisphere's closed circuit. There is nothing new coming into the world. The idea of Heidegger the importance of Heidegger for the theme of this book lies not only in his perception that ultimately the world is given by the right hemisphere, he went even further and appears intuitively to have understood the evolving relationship between the hemispheres, which forms the subject of the second part of this book. namely that with at times tumultuous upheavals, retrenchments and lurches forward, there has been nonetheless relentless move towards the erosion of the power of the right hemisphere over recent centuries in the West. Heidegger saw that there was a fatal continuity between the assertive, predicative, definitional, classificatory idiom of Western metaphysics and that will to rational technological mastery of life, which he calls nihilism. In the question concerning technology and other essays, he wrote that the fundamental event of the modern age is the conquest of the world as picture. He saw scientific research as bringing a certain type of narrow and decontextualized methodology to bear on nature and on history, which isolated and objectified its subject and was essential to the character of the enterprise. What is value? Value for Scheele is a precognitive aspect of the existing world, which is neither purely subjective, i.e., whatever I take it to be, nor purely consensual, whatever we agree to be. It is not, he asserts, something which we derive or put together from some other kind of information. Any more than we derive a color or come to a conclusion about it by making a calculation. It comes to us in its own right, prior to any such calculation being made. This position is importantly related to two right hemisphere themes which we have encountered already. The importance of context and of the whole. For example, the same act carried out by two different people may carry an entirely different value. Which is why morality can never be a matter of actions or consequences taken out of context. Whether that be the broader context or that of the mental world of the individual involved. The weakness of a too rigidly codified judicial system. Hence, we judge some things that would, out of context, be considered weaknesses to be part of what is valuable or attractive in the context of a particular person's character. We do not arrive at the judgment on a by a person by summoning the totality of their characteristics or acts, but judge their characteristics or acts by the whole that we know that person to be. The values of the useful and pleasurable, those of the lowest rank, are the only ones to which left hemisphere modes of operation are applicable. And even these are often self-defeating to pursue, as the paradox of hedonism demonstrates. As things are represented in the left hemisphere, it is their use value that is salient. In the world it brings into being. Everything is either reduced to utility or rejected with considerable vehemence. A vehemence that appears to be born of frustration and the affront to its will to power. The higher values in Scheler's hierarchy, all of which require affective or moral engagement with the world, depend on the right hemisphere. It is said that the meaning of the Hebrew words translated as good and evil in the Genesis myth of Adam and Eve eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil means precisely the useful and the useless. In other words, what is useful for survival and what is not. So here we come to terms with evil itself. Evil is when we starting to use things for the purposefulness, and it's even depicted in the Bible, this descent to the lower. In this reread, which it is for me because I read Master and his Emissary 2 years ago, I recognize so many things, but the retake is also fresh. It's more of a right hemisphere understanding. I feel that I left the quasi-intellectualism of the university world from which I stem in getting into true thinking, where the concepts are born, where they still are alive, they are not empty. Sometimes I remember the words of the professors and educators within academia. The words were so crisp, so dry, so lacking of life, lacking of any energy aspect. These things came to haunt me for years. The utmost superficiality and the mechanic feel to it. It could have been done by a computer. It could have been done by an automated system. No human being needed to be there. It was taking the old things you often found in a reference at the end of an article or book. You cut it apart or you remolded it and you made a new thing, and then you either renamed it or you put two names next to each other to make a new thing. But there is nothing new coming in this, and there is no new understanding, because understanding the old means that we need to see it from a new polysemic aspect. Otherwise, it would just be a reflection of grasping, of anger. And that anger is also good. I have no idea how many times I experienced anger within academia. Frustration, irritation, envy. The lack of knowledge makes us hollow, makes us till phantasms, or why not, makes us to zombie. Zombies were very popular in academia. And this is something that McGilchrist later points out. that the zombie, the lifeless, automated, robot-like thing, is very typical of the modern day and age. It should be the emblem of modern academia, and Gilchrist is even harsher in some of his comments outside the book, where he allows himself to attack even more the points that are destroying our understanding. I say thank you very much and have a very pleasant afternoon. Bye bye for now.